Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Dravidian Does History. As you can see, this is another special episode of Dravidian Does History because I'm not home. I am in Newfoundland, St. John's, Newfoundland to be specific, for work purposes, and that's why this episode is going to be a short one and a very special one indeed. Today, I'm not going to be talking about historical realities in India itself. Today, I thought I would do something unique and discuss a historical fiction book instead of movies and other such material that we have discussed in previous episodes. That's why it's going to be a short episode because there's only so much you can talk about historical fiction in India. The book that I'm going to be talking about today is called The Shadow Princess, written by Indu Sundaresan. The book came out about 2 decades ago, and it's part of what is called the Taj Mahal Trilogy. It discusses the life of Princess Jahanara or Jahanara Begum, and the trilogy itself is the story of women in the Mughal harem or Zanana. So obviously, as somebody who's interested in Indian history, when I went out looking for historical fiction novels, I came across this one, and because I'm interested in the life of Jahanara Begum, I thought I'd give it a chance. So I read the book. Even though it's the third in a trilogy, you don't feel the need to read any of the previous books to be able to enjoy this particular one. You can jump right into it, and it is a standalone piece. And if you read the other books, it enriches your experience, but it doesn't take away from it if you haven't read any of the ones before it. It also helps that if you have some context regarding the historical setting, which is Mughal India, which is in the 17th century. But if you don't, again, that's not a detractor to your experience while you're reading the book. Now, talking about the book in itself, I found that the book was written really well. Indu is a fantastic writer when it comes to descriptions, especially of the feelings of the people she's discussing. But her most well executed aspect of the book is the historical data that is provided. She clearly had done a solid amount of research regarding the characters and the historical period and uh, collecting information from contemporary sources as well as later sources. So that is displayed quite proficiently in the novel itself. But that is also a detriment to the novel because it reads more like a book on history with a loose story thread that tries to hold it together. That actually acts as the deterrent to be able to enjoy the book, at least to my experience. As somebody who's enjoyed novels for most of my life until I started reading history, I am familiar with what is expected from a work of fiction, as well as what is expected from a good historical non-fiction material. And the combination of those two parts do not go so well together in this book. The novel itself, the story itself, fairly simple and straightforward. It is supposed to tell the life story of Princess Jahanara, or Jahanara Begum, as she would have been called. Um, Her life of around 65 years is a very eventful one. It's a very complicated life. She had very complicated emotions. She was a Sufi writer. Her father was the emperor of the most successful dynasty, not only in India at the time, but probably in the world. And then she also had to watch her family kind of collapse in on itself when there was a dynastic struggle when her father became ill. And then she watched as her siblings were murdered by their youngest sibling, who then finally took the throne. So her story is quite complicated in that she was the top female presence in the family after her mother's death, her mother being Mumtaz Mahal, for whom the Taj Mahal was built by Shah Jahan. So again, it's a very interesting life. It's a very complicated life. There's a lot of threads to pull here. But unfortunately, I found that the novel itself did not dig too deep into any of these threads. I found that while the historical descriptions were quite beautiful and very detailed, there was a lot more telling than showing, which is a fatal flaw if you're trying to write fiction. You should help the reader experience events rather than tell him what happened, or even, uh, you know, instead of showing what events are taking place, you tell him this happened in a few years. Why are you telescoping the events? That doesn't help the narrative in any way at all. So that was another detriment to the experience of reading this book. I did not enjoy it as much, even though the writing is really good, the language is beautiful, because it reads like a historical piece. it doesn't quite sit well in your reading experience because you're not experiencing the joy of reading something about history and you're not enjoying the beautiful flowing style that you'd expect from a novel. So it has a bit of an identity crisis, which is what I found. Others who might not have as much historical reference to the period or who don't know the history of the period as much may enjoy it far better because you will be immersed in this world and the world comes alive in the hands of the writer. So it could just be a personal preference. Another thing that I did not quite enjoy is the depiction of some of the characters because I found that a lot of the characters were quite cliched. For example, Aurangzeb, who later becomes Padshah Alamgir I, is shown as being a zealot right from the beginning, and there is no nuance to his character. His motivations aren't fleshed out. Why he's acting the way as an adult, that's not fleshed out. None of the events that took place that led up to his challenge to his father and then imprisoning him, and then why his reign turned out the way it did. None of this is explored. The same goes for Shah Jahan himself. I think of all the historical characters, Shah Jahan himself was the most fleshed out in a way because he comes across as more of a human than just the image of the ultimate Mughal that he is in historical records and in the general consciousness. His character comes across a little bit better. But then again, Dara Shikoh, who's supposed to be another tragic figure in the story, doesn't come across really well. We only get glimpses of him as a person. And Jahanara herself fails to make any kind of impact because her story is dulled down so much, and a fictional romance is provided, a fictional son is provided. So yeah, the enjoyment of the historical elements are dulled by the fictional elements, and the fictional elements ruin the enjoyment of the historical elements if you are somebody who is familiar with the history. So this clash of tones is what drove me to not enjoying this book. I did not enjoy it at all because it was too cliched. The history was not given due justice, and the fictional element was also not provided. It's just desserts. So, in the end, for people who enjoy historical fiction, this might be an enjoyable affair, especially if you wanted to read about Indian history from a non-fiction, sorry, a fictional perspective, could be a good opening salvo. But apart from that, I can't really recommend it. I will explore further historical fiction and maybe we'll discuss them in a future episode. But I think that's enough for today because I don't want to be rambling on about a book that came out about 20 years ago. But if you do want to check out, I'll post a link for the book on Goodreads so you can go and check out the reviews from others and maybe judge the book based on these collective reviews and not just my opinion. So until then, I hope you have a good time. Maybe check out the book The Shadow Princess by Indu Sundaresan and continue watching my videos, and I'll be back next week. Ciao.